very precious these days. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mansi, and I'm the founder of Unconform Studio and also the organizer of these monthly conversations that explore one central question, which is how might we design for women? This question is also at the heart of who we are as an organization. Unconform is also a space that conducts research and supports women's focused projects. And we write a newsletter and create resources on this topic. So I'll share a link in a follow-up email or later in the chat where you can sign up to the newsletter if you're interested. So the way today will work is that first we'll hear from our practitioners, Mérida and Chelsea, who I will introduce in just a second. I ask that you keep yourself muted throughout this call, but the chat is open for you to discuss or throw in your questions. So just use the chat to comment on anything or however you would like to use it. After the panel discussion, we'll do a quick Q&A, or if not quick, a nice Q&A. So feel free to just throw in your questions at any time, because we'll just be collecting them and then asking them together during the Q&A time. Then after the Q&A, we'll go into breakout rooms where you'll get to meet some of the fellow participants here today who are also interested in the inquiry of designing for women. And we have a central question that the practitioners and I have co-created for you to explore together that is very, very thematically posed. So we'll wait for that. And then we'll come back for a checkout and I'll share some information on the next conversation next month. And then as a quick reminder, we will keep the Zoom room open for 15 more minutes past the hour in case you want to stay on, and just that part of the conversation is unfacilitated and just for us to hang out together. Yes, we're also recording this conversation. So in case that is uncomfortable for you, just switch your video off. That's a good way for it to be unintrusive. I want to also just bring your attention to our code of conduct, which you might have seen in our RSVP form. A reminder that this is a safe space for everyone and any kind of harassment will not be tolerated. In case you have any issues, you can message me in the chat or Fabian, who is my husband/intern for today. And yes, he's here to support us. I think that's all the logistics and we can get started. All right. So I'm really excited to introduce our two practitioners for today. First up, Chelsea Slater. She's co-founder of InnovateHer. Chelsea has dedicated her work to achieve gender equality within the tech sector. Her direct experiences of inequality within her previous roles inspired her and her business partner, Joe, to start InnovateHer, a social enterprise on a mission to get girls ready for the tech industry, and very important for me, the tech industry ready for girls. InnovateHer educates and inspires teenage girls to have careers in tech whilst helping companies to be more inclusive. With her team, Chelsea plans to become a leading tech education provider across the UK and beyond. Chelsea, welcome to the space. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love for you to introduce yourself today by sharing a stereotype that you've struggled with since you were young, and what role that plays in your life today, given that that's our theme for the day.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me on here. I'm delighted to be here. And that was a lovely introduction, by the way. I wish you could introduce me everywhere. It's much better than I do it normally. So I love this question. And I faced, I think, loads of stereotypes, as many women have, from a very early age. And a lot of the time, I didn't even realise they were happening at the time. So it's only really since we've started InnovateHer and I've been exploring this work that I've really reflected on some of the things that might have happened and thought, right, oh yeah, that was definitely I was stereotyped in that moment. But I think one that really stands out for me, and one that I struggle with a lot, is that a lot of people think that women are very emotional and that is a weakness. So I I'm highly emotional. I cry all of the time. Leanne, who's in the chat, she'll also agree that I do this, because I do it in team meetings a lot, and in general life. But I think that I've learned that being that vulnerable and showing that emotion often develops trust with the people that I've been around. And it's only recently really that I've explored it in that way and felt like it was a good thing. So I've done quite a few talks recently and talked about some of the things that I felt that are my weaknesses, but I've kind of tried to flip them into positives. So I think being an emotional person is definitely one of those things. And I think true conversations can begin when people let that emotion kind of happen and explain why it's happening and that kind of stuff. So in the past, I would often, and still do sometimes, apologize for getting emotional. And in some cases I still do that, and I notice that a lot about myself, which I should probably stop. But I think what I've realized is that it just shows that I care about whatever it is I'm getting emotional about, and actually I'm trying to turn that into a bit of a superpower, so that you know, other people, especially when you're working with young girls, it's like sometimes they won't try to show emotion or get embarrassed because they don't think it's a good thing, and society has told us that. And I think as women, when they lead with compassion, or often are not with compassion because they don't think that that's a good way to lead, I think it's quite damaging. So I've got a very short story about being emotional in terms of winning clients. I think when you run a business, it tends to be quite masculine, and you kind of adopt these traits that you think that you should be like, which actually are really masculine. So one of the times that I want to share is that me and my co-founder went to a city council meeting in Manchester, and this was a few years back. And it was hilarious. We both cried in the meeting, and it was a meeting where we wanted them to give us money. So it was a bit of a pitch, and we were sharing our story, and it was three female leaders from the council. And we ended up making them cry as well. So it was quite a funny meeting actually, but I think it was a first for all of us. Like, it was definitely a first for us because we were sharing the stories, and the stories were emotive. They were about the girls that were coming through our program, and some of them, you know, that they're just amazing, and they're really empowering stories. But we were emotional sharing them. The people that were sitting there hearing it, they were emotional. And I think that was we ended up winning the client. Basically, they funded us, and I think in that moment I thought, you know, they accepted our emotion, they got emotional, we accepted that, and at the end of the day we had a really good relationship with someone that funded our business. And I think that only happened in that case because it was two women that were also open to that emotion. But I do think that in a lot of senses, and that's kind of proof in one area, is that this emotion can work for people. And I think if we embraced it more, then it would be much easier. So that's definitely one of the stereotypes I still struggle with. I definitely don't think it's a weakness anymore. I'm trying to embrace it, but it's a constant battle, I think, and learning curve for me and others as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Chelsea. And, you know, I was speaking to a woman who's designing finance products for women in India, and I loved something she said. She said, I know women are always told like they're too emotional, but I'm thinking of that in my design as emotion is a feature, not a bug. And that really stuck with me. And I think maybe Mérida, I've shared that with you before, or someone I shared it with said, I'm going to write that down right now.
I love that. I'm definitely going to write it down now. That's awesome.
Okay, so with that, I will now introduce our second practitioner for the day, Mérida Miller. Originally from the US, Mérida studied fashion design in university, and after graduating, worked for Under Armour as an advanced concept designer for their innovation team. After 7 years at Under Armour, she knew that although the job title and company were cool, it wasn't where she was meant to be. She knew that she needed to create a space where she could be hands-on and active, create an impact, and most importantly, create a space where she could empower people to reach their best selves. Now she spends her days working with some of the most talented and unique women in Amsterdam to help make Project Fearless a success. Mérida, welcome to the space, and thank you so much for being here. I would also love to hear from you a stereotype about girls that you've struggled with since you were young and still struggle with today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. Really excited. And so nice to meet Chelsea. We've been having these virtual email exchanges, and it's so nice to kind of like be in the same room with you. So thank you, Mansi, for creating this space. Yeah, this is one I was thinking about this morning as I was kind of mulling these questions. I knew this was coming, so I wanted to have a little bit of mulling time, but I often find myself struggling between like, what's a stereotype? What's a pressure of society, and what is this patriarchal system that we're all a part of, and how these kind of all feed into each other, and at the same time make us sometimes feel like we're in charge, but then there's still systems in place that hold us back. So and I was thinking about like which of these sort of affect me the most, but also the girls that I work with. And I think the main thing is like all of these pressures that are still really contradictory to how the world tells us we should feel. So like, especially when it comes to like, I'll give you a quick one of like the narrative or the stereotype is all girls who wear makeup or only care about their looks. Social media, care about your looks, but in a way that doesn't look like you care about your looks, but then post in a way that people still feel that self-conscious about the way you look to make them want to look better and keep following you. And like, and then the mind flip of like, oh, but also stand up for not wearing makeup and show how beautiful your face is, but not too raw, because then it's different. And like that same can be, also about body positivity, right? So like we know, girls and myself know we should celebrate body positivity, but in the real world, there are still so many systems in place and marketing in place that show us that actually people don't accept all body types as beautiful. And I think like, it's such a struggle. Like we're smart, like the girls are smart too. Like we read between the lines, and there's even studies have shown that you could do surveys with girls, and girls know they should say, I'm confident in my body, because that's what they know you want them to hear. And yet it's still like a constant like struggle. And so, yeah, I think that's that stereotype struggle of like, am I thinking this because I feel empowered because I think this, or am I thinking this because I'm being told I need to think this? And do I really think this? So it's a little, a mix. And I'm not sure if it's a stereotype. It all plays into each other. So those are ones that I currently struggle with on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mérida. I can also quickly share mine. I think for me, a big one that I struggle with is like boys are better at numbers than girls, or being scared of finance. And I will say that in my relationship, I am better at numbers than my husband is, and he can nod at that because he's in this call.
He can nod at that. Like he can nod at that.
But I still, because I grew up in this space of like, my dad was taking care of all the finances, that if the money thing is like a male thing, that is something that I still have to actively work on all the time. So, and I resonated with both of yours so much as well, like the mind flips and the emotion with women. But, since this is a talk about young women, I'd love to jump in with our first question. Something that makes me really jealous is that both of you get to work directly with so many young girls. I got to do that a little bit in college, but I don't really get that interaction anymore. So I think maybe we can start off from hearing from both of you, like what is something that has surprised you about young women as you built your initiatives? Mérida, do you want to start with this one?
Sure, I can start. For me, I think I definitely forgot how at that age, 1 year or even 1 month can be so different from girl to girl. because of hormones and because of puberty. And because I know now, like I have friends who range from 25 to 50 or even older, and it feels very similar. Yes, we've had different life experiences, but like we can all relate and talk at the same time. But gosh, there's so much happening in that age group. And we work with 9 through 14. And I can tell you, you can have two 11-year-olds who are next to each other, and their current life experience, like meaning like how they are viewing the world and experiencing life, is shockingly different. And I feel like that's something I would really, when I think back to my school years, like nobody talked about that. People talked about the pads you pick, how like, you know, how not to be embarrassed about there being blood on your pants, but like nobody talked about how terrifying it feels that your body and the world are like totally changing. Your body and your mind are totally changing. And then also like how weird that is when one day you are totally fine being like, you know, you're in control, you're goofy, you're crazy, and your friends are that way, and then the next day or the next month that switched, and holy shit, sorry for my cursing, all of a sudden the people that you used to be like or with, like you look at as obnoxious and juvenile, and that's also conflicting. And yeah, I wish that more schools or more talks around puberty and hormones really spoke about the mental health and the emotional health at that age. Because I think, and creating spaces where girls can talk about that, because, you know, girls often, we hear them talking about cramps and we hear them talking about like, oh, I started my period, I didn't start a period. But nobody openly says, because you think at that time, I'm the only one in the world who feels like I'm going crazy right now. Nobody really talks about like how much is shifting at like an insane rate, and how that can really affect how we feel and face the world and accept the world. Yeah, so that was one thing that is still shocking to me and surprising, and especially now that I have girls who have come to us when they were 9 and are now, you know, 10 and a half or something, or we've been with them for a year and a half. So to see one girl this year versus next year, something like that, it's really shocking and surprising.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mérida. What about you? What about you, Chelsea? What have you seen?
I was just smiling all the way through that, because I was thinking back at my, like when I was a teenager, and God, this is just making me reflect so much. And I was laughing because at InnovateHer, our team talks about periods most days, and it's so nice to be able to talk about that with women going through various things in our lives. And you know, you never get that opportunity, so it's so true, and it's so nice to hear someone that's so passionate about the like teenagers and what they're going through. And I think that's something that we'll take away from this conversation. Anyway, to answer the question, I think what I was most surprised at, and still am really, is how passionate about doing good these young people are. And we've worked with thousands of these young people now, and we're consistently surveying them and speaking to them. And I would say the majority of them want to do good in the world. And that's so much more different, I think, to me when I was growing up. So all I really cared about growing up was Britney Spears, what I was doing on the weekend, what I was having for lunch that day or on the weekend. Like, that's all I really cared about, like being honest. And it was only when I got into the workplace and realized how rubbish it was for women that I really wanted to do something to change that. But now I feel like these teenage girls are so much more connected to what's going on in the world, and they, you know, it must be so hard for them because they are on social media, they are absorbing everything that's going on in the world every single day. It's the first thing they wake up to. They're talking about it with their friends. We're all talking about it to them. So, you know, it comes with a lot of issues as well. But I think there is that main thread of interest between them all, wanting to do good. So whether that's for climate change or healthcare, human rights, policy, politics, whatever, they're learning to become activists very young. And as I said, I think this might be because of the access to the news and things that certainly I didn't have when I was younger. I never really got to see any of the news apart from if it was on telly in the nighttime, you know, and my mum had it on, but even she wasn't in like really that political or into what was happening, so I didn't really get access there. So it's really nice and genuinely just lovely, and I'm hopeful that this next generation is actually going to do some really great things within the world. To add to that, so we've got a Tech for Good program at InnovateHer, and they get to solve problems for local businesses, whether that's a children's hospital or whatnot, and we get them to learn in this way and use technology to help people. And there is a light bulb moment that they have when they realize that the tech skills that they're learning can actually do this, because this is one of the issues that comes with it. Yeah, they do care and they want to change the world, but how they do that with the skills that they're learning in school is quite often not showcased within school. So that's what we're trying to do, and you know, that's a great thing for employers to know that the next generation wants to do. They want to do good and they want to work for people that is doing good. There was an article that came out a few weeks ago. It was a research from Glassdoor, and it was in the Guardian, and it said that Generation Z, 73% of them said that they want to work for companies that do good, that are diverse, and you know, that's what's happening. So yeah, employers need to make real changes. But yeah, it does definitely give me hope that they're going to all change the world for the better.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. And I'll just say a quick reminder to all our attendees here, you know, we're slowly going to move into Q&A. So definitely send your questions for Mérida and Chelsea in the chat as I ask the next question, which is, maybe you can tell us a story of how you arrived at a deliberate design decision in your programs that you have both created that is actually working to chip away or break stereotypes that young women come up against. So feel free to jump in, either of you.
I can jump in if that's all right, Chelsea. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, this is a great one. So it actually goes back all the way before Project Fearless was Project Fearless. And it was just like a concept of, okay, I want to create a space that made an impact, that empowered people, that was creative. So it like had hands-on stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm going to work with young people. And my initial thought was to do co-ed. And the reason was because when I was young, girls were horrible to me. And also horrible to each other. Like, it wasn't just me. I also I elected to eat lunch every day in the detention office to not navigate the lunchroom situation. And so I wanted to hide for that. And I wanted to bring guy friends in because I thought that's where I feel safe. That's where I felt safe at that age. Girls must also feel safe for that. But then I thought, okay, obviously, like, not everybody's born mean. Why is there this stereotype? And sometimes why is that stereotype true? Like, to be honest, why is that stereotype true? And how can we break that stereotype? So how can we create a space where girls can come in and feel outside of the social pressures, feel outside of the system that they're placed in at school? Because sometimes you don't get to choose where you are in the hierarchy. And show girls, especially, how good it feels to be themselves and be accepted as themselves, and then create that same space for each other in hopes that it will then, you know, reflect and ripple outside of the Project Fearless walls. And so, yeah, so that's the one stereotype that I kind of had to do a deep dive into myself. And yeah, because from a selfish standpoint, my immediate thought was like, yeah, let's do co-eds, because boys were where I felt safe at that age. That was who accepted me. And so, yeah, but I'm very thankful because I now see the importance of creating that space where girls can support each other, and girls who can recognize that there is room for all of us, and also talk about why sometimes these I want, like, these stereotypes end up being real, you know, like, why is it that sometimes girls do really have a struggle? And is that because of scarcity mindset? Is that because we don't see as many girls in spaces? Is that because we feel there can only be one funny girl and one leader, you know? So how do we really break down those walls and talk about it in a space that feels safe for girls to talk about? Yeah, actually, I have been a bully, and it was because I felt that I had to be a bully in order to get ahead, something like that. Or I've been bullied and it didn't feel nice, but now, like, I can recognize that I can still be myself and people love and accept me for who I am. So
yeah,
I love that.
yeah. Mérida, I was also just thinking about something I think about in the Design for Women work is, for example, do we want to name that women have imposter syndrome, or are we making it worse by naming it? Like, what's the balance? So I think about that a lot, and like, I still think that there's power in naming something.
Totally.
So you create that, like, hey, this is actually something that happens, and you make it powerless by naming it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that just.
Yeah, no, for us, I think naming is part of just the awareness journey. Like, it's not just that you're going to name it and immediately be like, oh, that's this, I'm going to switch my actions. Like, you may be already in the action and then being like, ooh, you know, but that's part of it. Is like, first just recognizing, oh, I'm doing this. Cause I think one thing that we all recognize is, like, when we do it, it doesn't feel good, you know? There may be a result at the end that feels a little good, but like, in the moment, we know this is wrong, or this feels yucky, even with imposter syndrome. So whether it's imposter or, you know, scarcity mindset, like, we know it doesn't feel good. So it's in recognizing, how's my body reacting? How am I reacting? Why doesn't it feel good? Yeah. So I'm a believer in naming it and talking about it in a way that sort of is like, we've all been there. We've all done it. I still have it sometimes. And so I've noticed when it comes up to me now, like, why did I feel I needed to react that way? Oh, is it because I'm worried that there's not room for both of us? Is that the case? You know, move on from there.
Yeah. Chelsea, what about you? How have you designed something at InnovateHer to go at breaking stereotypes that young women might face?
This is a hard question for me, really. I have never, I think because we've done this for about 7 or 8 years, and we knew a lot of the kind of stereotypes that were surrounding us as women, we kind of avoided all of them stereotypes. Like, for example, using the colour pink in our adverts and stuff. But coming back to what we were talking about before, I don't know whether that, like, we don't care if women like the colour pink. It shouldn't be a thing. Like, everyone should be able to have that, you know, choice. And I think that's what InnovateHer is all about, is you know, designing. We design with our community, and we do that. We've done that from the beginning. So we've never really made a decision without them. So I can talk a little bit about how we developed the InnovateHer brand, and that's kind of answers the question, but also maybe doesn't, swerves it a bit. But we developed it alongside a group of young women with an amazing agency called Unconform in Liverpool. And so from the get-go, we were asking them, like, what colours do they like? And we had lots of mood boards everywhere, and they kind of helped us make decisions on what attracted them to the certain mood board. And they came up with a name as well, InnovateHer. We previously had a community called Girl Geek, but again, that came with a lot of challenges. Does the word girl work in this case? So we want to empower these girls and call them women. Like, I don't know whether that was a subconscious decision or something that we really wanted to kind of move forward with, but they chose InnovateHer, and we were very surprised. And that was probably our own bias coming in there, is we were very surprised that they wanted to call it InnovateHer. We thought that was very mature and not suited to their age group. So that was definitely something we learned through that process. But I think more recently, and Leanne could talk about this well better than me, but I'm not going to put her on the spot. I know she's here, but we've developed that further recently in terms of building our e-learning platform. So we're going to launch this e-learning platform in April. And Leanne's been heavily involved in surveying and hosting many focus groups that directly influences that design. So she's been asking them like what language we should use, what terms we should use, pronouns, that kind of thing, colours, how long the courses should be. So every single detail of that e-learning platform is being led by them. We've even gone one step further and looked at intersectionality of women and accessibility as well. So we're embedding things for people with that might be colourblind, for example, and we've been asking the girls about design functions like having a toggle on the site to change her to them or you or us or whatnot, and it's just so lovely to work in that way. So I don't know whether that did answer the question, but I think from the get-go we've kind of tried to avoid the stereotypical female design traits that, you know, a lot of people use. Not because we don't like them, but it's because we want to try and demystify what women kind of like and what we should be doing. And I don't know. That answers the question.
No, it definitely does. And I love how there's two different approaches that were shared by both of you here, and both are powerful and both take a different approach to solving that problem. So thank you for sharing that. And with that, we'll move into, we have some questions from the audience here. Leslie has asked, what are some strategies you recommend for preserving and protecting sensitivity in young people? Leslie, if you wanna take a moment to unmute yourself, and if you have anything to add there for our practitioners, please feel free to share.
Yeah, hi. This is my little young person.
Hi.
And I've just been growing and noticing, right, Mia?
No.
That she is naturally really sensitive. And there's just, whenever people in my family say, you know, like, don't cry, or, you know, why are you crying, or try and distract or whatever. And I just want to, well, just let her have her feelings. And I've just been noticing for myself how closeted of a sensitive person I actually am. And like, I just never thought that I was sensitive. And it's like, well, if we could, from like this age, and especially at that age when they're, you know, really dealing with stress of figuring out who they are, you know, how can we ensure that it's okay to be sensitive? Sensitivity is a superpower and a strength. And, you know, I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
Hi, I love that she's
So fun.
I kind of touched on this before. I haven't got children, but I'm one of 7. I never know how many brothers and sisters I've got, but I predominantly grew up in a very male environment, and they have always said, like, you know, don't cry, or, you know, you shouldn't like show your emotion, or man up. That was even a phrase I got, because, you know, there's lots of boys in my family, and also I'm the oldest, so I think I got told to be very independent. But I think it's really nice actually that you've noticed, and you're doing, like, I can imagine you're doing the very best thing that I would have liked. And it's like, and what's helping me now is just to talk about them emotions. And I think if you can do that from a very early age, I'm sure she looks very young, so I'm guessing, you know, she's going to be brought up by you talking about them feelings from a very early age. And I think that's just so important, and that is going to probably get harder as she grows up when she's in schools, and when she's in like general kind of public life, because there's so many different pressures that come at all angles. But I think if she has the confidence to talk about her feelings openly, I think that is a superpower, as you said, and that would have helped me a lot growing up, I think.
I was just going to add, like, as Chelsea said, you know, like, she's lucky that you were even that aware right now. Like, I think that's just, as we were saying, like, awareness is the first step to action, and like, that's a big step. So yeah, I mean, I think she's lucky to have you. And I think you're already doing, just being aware that they're not only like of yourself, and congratulations, like welcome, welcome to discovering that about yourself as well. But also not pushing, you know, I think I certainly see, like, we have parents who really push their kids into stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I want her to go to skateboarding, but she's going to go kicking and screaming. And so then I have the delicate balance of asking them, like, well, why do you think she needs skateboarding? You know, and there is like there's a fine balance of like, yes, you want to set them up for success and like nudge them out of their comfort zone, because comfort zones are hard, but equally like listening and accepting that there's many ways in the world to lead, to be confident. Like, everybody gets to write their own definitions of confidence. And if you know, talk about that and talk about your journey, I think she's really set up better than a lot of us. So yeah, I appreciate that for the rest of the world too, that there are parents out there who are thinking of that from a young age. That's awesome.
Thank you. We'll take one more, sorry. Thank you, Leslie, for asking the question too. We'll take one more question. We are running a little late for breakout rooms, but I'd love to get another question in. It's from Kate, and she's asking, what are the outcomes you're both seeing in your programs, and are any of them things that you didn't expect? Kate, if you'd like to add anything to that, please feel free to unmute yourself and elaborate.
Hi there. Hi. I no, nothing to add. I just would love to hear. Hi, Mérida. I would just love to hear about what's coming out of these great initiatives. Yeah.
Chelsea, do you want to?
Yeah. We've just done our social impact report actually, and we're very proud of it. Because we're starting to see, so we work from the age of 12, 13 up to 18, 16, 17. And now we're starting to see the young people that we worked with back in 2016 actually now getting jobs or going to university or getting an apprenticeship in the sector. So that is just like, that's why we do it, and that makes my heart sing. And all of the girls that we were in my team, we keep seeing these little snippets of like stories that are happening recently like that, which is amazing. And one of the girls reached out to us on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and like, she wasn't confident at all. So when we first we did one of our first programs with her, and she'd struggle like leaving her parents to come to the classroom, and by week 8, because we used to do like 8-week programs face to face, she'd be standing up on the tables shouting about her work. And then the year later we had to get some work experience, and then now she's 18, she's in her first year at university studying computer science. It's like, it has taken 4 years, but that is just amazing to see someone with like no confidence and very low self-esteem to, you know, working in the sector and reaching out to us on LinkedIn to say, you know, this is because of your program. Like, that's amazing. And another thing, just quickly, we were having a lot of impact at GCSE level. So teachers are getting in touch with us to say that they've been able to put on a computer science course or workshop that they've never been able to before, because the numbers are higher now because girls are interested after our program. So that's one thing that's that was one thing that we aimed for, but it also comes as a massive shock that, you know, a 6 to 8 week program, which is actually only about 14 hours long, can change the decision a young person makes when they're picking their GCSEs. And that still like kind of blows my mind. It's small interventions like that can make such a huge difference. So whether it's something that us or Project Fearless are doing, or yourselves, like if you're able to get into a school or inspire your daughter or sit with her for an hour, or your niece or whoever it is, that could make a massive difference to their decisions. So yeah,
that's super
Fabulous.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Chelsea. So we're a little, like I said, running a little late, but I'd love for us to still have the opportunity to meet each other. That is a big part of these conversation events. So we'll go into small groups and explore a question that that the practitioners and I have co-created for you. I'm putting a link into the chat here that where you can, with your team, put in some of the reflections that come up around the question. The question we're exploring is, what's the stereotype you've struggled with and what has helped to break or chip away at it? So Fabian will just be throwing us into groups of 3 or 4. If you find yourself in a breakout room alone, just come back into the main room and we'll put you into another one. And then we'll meet again and have a checkout. So yeah, I hope you have fun meeting some of the other folks that are here, and thank you for being here. Have fun in your conversations.
Hi, Chelsea and Anna and Kaylin. Let me know if you'd like to join a breakout group and if you have any problems. I assume you might not, just might be not on your computer right now or something, but if I can do something to help you, please let me know.
Wonderful. I think we're all back. So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of our breakout rooms. I hope you had a great discussion. So quick reminder, we will keep the Zoom room open for 15 minutes after the hour, but I do want to use the last 4 minutes while we're still together as a group to say thank you to Chelsea and Mérida. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories and being so open with us, and for doing the work that you're doing. And thank you for being here today. I hope that was wonderful for you both to be here as well. Quickly to share, our next conversation event is happening on April 20th. I've just put a link in the form, and I will also follow up in case you want to RSVP to this. It is around designing sports for women. And I know we talked about mixed gender spaces today at some point. I think Mérida, it was you who was saying, like, should I make a mixed gender space or should I make a female only space? So next time, actually, we have invited someone who is designing sports for women, who's designing sports for both boys and girls, but uses a female-centric lens to do that, and believes that, boys and men are part of the problem, so we have to make them part of the solution. So, so we'll have a nice chat on that next time. Yeah, and before we say goodbye, I would love for you to all to take a moment to give us some feedback. Feedback is a big part of how we design for women, to incorporate having listened from you how things were. So again, another link in the chat. If you could just take a moment to fill that out, I'll just give you a couple minutes now. It's really fast and straightforward.
I already signed up for that next event, Mansi. That sounds so good, and something I know we had all talked about behind the scenes of, like, how do you design for women, but make sure you're not designing in a silo. And so yes. I'm excited. I'm excited to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great one. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mérida. All right. Yeah. Yeah, and as we say goodbye, if you can't stay for longer, as you finish up the feedback form, just tell us what was your one takeaway in the chat before you leave, and tell us how you're leaving this call. And I hope to see you at a future Design for Women conversation. And I hope that this hour was valuable for you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mansi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Well, and now we can do unfacilitated conversations. So I don't have to drive anything, but whoever would like to, raise anything, ask questions, we're open for open conversation.
You're free, Mansi.
I'm free. It's not my chat anymore.
Love it.
I'm curious, Mérida and Chelsea, and maybe just anyone, in the work that you're doing is so mission driven, and I also do work in education that is co-ed, but still feels very much like you're making such a significant contribution in children's lives that it's very motivating. And also I get really scared about making mistakes sometimes, or like I have to test and try, but sometimes that's not going to work out. So I was just curious, how do you deal with that? Like, what are some of the things you're afraid of, and how do you keep trying and pushing ahead, knowing that you have to make mistakes in order to make progress, but that it can be particularly scary?
Yeah, that's a real good one. As a like suffering perfectionist too, I think that's a hard one. I've definitely had a lot of sleepless nights where I've gone over, like, mulling over something that happened where it's like, could that have been prevented? Did we do it right? What's the best way to move forward? Yeah, and I think as you said, is just knowing in your heart that you have to make mistakes to move forward, and that you'll learn from every experience. And I think one of the things that came out specifically around the activism around the Black Lives Matter movement this summer for me was that, like, as an ally, you have to keep moving forward, and you will make mistakes, and it will be uncomfortable, and it will be awkward, and it will be, like, especially if you're somebody who takes it to the heart, soul crushing, because you're like, well, shit, that's definitely not what I meant, but I'm going to move forward from this. And I think I take that into my work of, like, I'm an ally for these young people, and there will be mistakes, and we're only human, and also sometimes owning those mistakes to them, of like, hey, last week we talked about this, didn't go as planned, let's revisit, or I actually done some research and it turns out that I was wrong. And that feels, for me, I know some people it's harder to say I'm wrong, but for me, that feels really safe, actually. So for me, it's easier to do that. And the girls really respect that. And, like, I'm always so happy for their embracing and their accepting of, like, okay, cool. Yeah, I was kind of questioning, but I didn't know, or yeah, like, that happens, so it's definitely tough. It's definitely tough. But I think it's harder for yourself than it is for the other side of things. At that age, they're quite adaptable.
I have to agree, I think, on most of that. I think, but our biggest challenge at the moment is the safety of young people, specifically online. I think it was much easier when we were working in schools, because they have these policies and procedures that they all have always worked within. So, you'd do safeguarding, and you'd do all of your checks if you were going or sending anyone into a school, and that was pretty straightforward, and there would be always a teacher in the classroom, blah, blah, blah. But online, you can't control other people's platforms. So Zoom, for example, you never know if someone's going to come into that space and it would be disturbing for a young person, or even if we're delivering adult events, it's still a massive concern for us, because we can't control other people's technology. So I think for us, it's safety first, and then everything else can be less of a worry, like content and all of that. As long as these people are safe, then everything else can come after that, the experience and all that, even though, and Leanne will Leanne's really passionate about the experience that someone has with us. Obviously we all are, and that's hard to, you know, let go sometimes when you actually just think you have to get the safety bit right first. So there's a lot of learning that is going on here because we're completely pivoting to the online space. So, and we are relying on other people's platforms to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, we just need to test. We need to make sure we got consent. We need to be upfront. I liked what you said there about being upfront and with these students and saying, you know, this might go wrong and it's okay. We do a lot of like constructive criticism stuff within our sessions, and a lot of feedback goes into all of our work and every single workshop that we deliver, because we say it's okay to make mistakes. So we kind of live by that. But it is hard. It is hard.
I think I've been thinking a lot about like my school experience. I don't know, for the last year, especially the first 5 years of my elementary school, where I went to a very strict Indian elementary school. And, you know, I don't remember any teacher ever saying like, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And that made the fear of making mistakes so much more real for me. Because anyway, like, I was in a very disciplined school, and all of that is changing now that, you know, you're starting to see schools that take things more compassionately, and it's not as strict, or you don't get punished as harshly for something you've done wrong. But still, like, having someone in a position of power say that they've made a mistake can allow space for it, and then it just eases both sides. But I mean, for someone like you, Suruchi, in education, like, how do you do that in such a big system? Or where do you start? Like, maybe it's part of even the teachers' trainings of like, well, this is a school where mistakes are allowed on both sides. But yeah. Also, yeah, how do you get someone on board for that? Is, especially with like parenting styles and parents becoming more protective of their children, all of that changing is like, yeah, I can imagine it's like really hard. But I wish more adults would have said, oh, I made a mistake and this happens and life happens, when I was younger, because then we would be less of perfectionists, right, today. Yeah, something I think about.
Yeah, that's all really helpful. And I think, Chelsea, your point around like, pick one thing that you know is really fundamental and like really focus on trying not to make mistakes there, even though obviously that's going to happen. Like the other mistakes, we are human.
Yeah.
But it makes it a little less overwhelming for me too, to think like, okay, I could probably be really, really good at one thing and then let some of the other stuff work itself out.
Yeah.
Or let somebody else be really good at the other things.
I was going to say.
Yeah. Feel like you accept, like, we can't all be professionals at all the things. So like, who else on your team can support you in that way? And I think that's also really relevant learning for the kids too. It's like, oh, working on a team is recognizing each other's like strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that, and creating that space. Or I know on our team, we also have like, I've had a coach be like, actually, Mérida, that's wrong. And it's like, oh, really? Like, cool. You know, like, you know, but we do it in such a respectful way that the kids can see that like, yeah, it's okay it's okay to make mistakes. People don't mock and like shame you. And like, it's also okay to be like, hey, actually, I've heard this, you know, and bring that up too.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Similar to Mansi, I don't feel like I saw that growing up. Sorry, go ahead, Leanne.
So I think the point around shame is what is so vital. It's like, I was brought up with a dad that admitted all of his mistakes and was incredibly emotional, and not probably your stereotypical, I guess, male person, even though he was in the police and he was very high up as a policeman, but he was just like a teddy bear, like full of emotion and full of, when he messed up, even if I was like 6 years old, or like he came up and said like, yeah, I messed up.
It's amazing.
And I'm sorry. And then I went into the world going, yes, this is how everyone is. And when we mess up, we just tell everyone and we explain when we've done wrong. And I went in like, why are you not saying sorry?
Mm.
Like, you should be saying sorry. Like, you've not said sorry. Like, that's not okay, even from this height to adults, you know, and really kind of taking on that kind of like.
Leanne, your childhood trauma happened in adulthood.
Yeah. No, it did. It did. In the workplace, I was like crying openly. Then people were like, why are you crying? And I'm like, why are you not crying?
Why are you not crying?
I'm crying because you've hurt me. And they're like, whoa, you are just open. And I was like, yeah. And I got told like I had to compartmentalize because I cried, because I found out there was like a big gender pay gap between me and a person that I'd hired. So I cried. And they were like, you can't cry. And I was like, what? This is the valid reason to be upset. I was just like, there's something wrong with you. Because so like not taking people's emotions into account.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I did. I got trauma as an adult. But shame, I guess, is the word. It's like these spaces are so important, because I think I listened to something recently about how children can just like express how they feel and not have a shame attached to it. And it's like when you truly feel comfortable, like I do at InnovateHer, you can express how you feel, and it's so much easier and easier to move through things, whether that's like a work project or like something that you're experiencing that week.
Yeah. I love that story. I think it also highlights, though, that women are often penalized more for being emotional, like I think Chelsea said at the beginning, or for admitting weakness or failure, like or maybe we just do it more and therefore we're penalized for it, because that's not what's seen as in the workplace. And I think that makes it a little harder too, because then you get like labeled a certain way, maybe. Even though I also agree, I think it is the most productive way to come to the right solution and move forward.
I think there's just a lot of rewriting of the rules that need to happen in leadership. And it's happening with like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. Like, she's such a compassionate leader. And people are recognizing that that's a great way to lead. So we just need more people, I think, showing compassion as leaders to like rebalance it. It's going to take a while, I think, but
that's exact. I had one of those same thing. I think, you know, Mansi, one of the questions that you were thinking of was like, what has high potential to break stereotypes? And as Chelsea said, it's leadership and the different types of leadership and what defines a leader and what defines confidence. But equally, like, as Surichi said, like, it's not easy when everybody else doesn't accept it. You know, like, you can be the one person banging the drum about it, and you can have people being like, they're right. But if nobody else is making space for that, you're still going to be the one person banging the drum. And this is the only way to get ahead, which is difficult. It's a whole system break that needs to be rewired, and that's going to take time.
And also, I find it hard, actually, when people aren't empathetic. Like, that's like trying to teach them or work with them. That's really hard, like something that I find really challenging. And it's okay as well that person isn't as empathetic or compassionate as me.
Yeah.
I mean, as an empathetic person, you'd say that because, you know, you'd try and empathize with everyone. But I think, you know, society has, in a lot of people, ingrained this kind of really masculine way of not showing compassion or being empathetic and getting to the top by only focusing on yourself. And, you know, there's a lot of unlearning to do there that I think we can all help with. But, you know, that takes strength in itself, doesn't it? Because you've got to be able to actually have the energy to help these people. But yeah, I think, that's a tricky one too. This whole conversation, I keep ending it and going, this is a hard one.
It's a hard one. It's all hard. It's all hard.
A big issue.
It's so hard. And it also often feels like, I don't know how you feel about Chelsea, but like, and somebody brought this up, it's like, well, for next time, that's why I'm so interested in the conversation next time. But it's like, we can only do so much from our side of things. Like, and that's, I had an experience last week where I had two experiences. One, and I'm gonna have to jump off in a second, I'm really sorry, but I overheard a couple of the girls talking about the rate of sexual harassment in the UK. And they were saying, one was like 97%, blah, 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 blah. And street harassment, sexual harassment includes unwanted touching, rape, sexual, being yelled at on the street, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the girls noticed I was listening, and she looked up at me and she said, "Are you one of the 3%?" Meaning one of the 3% who has it. And I had to say, unfortunately, no. And I was stunned. I was shocked, because it was like, I spend 27 hours of the day working on empowering girls for a better life. This, I cannot empower you for, because it's not going to be one time. It doesn't stop at one time. It is going to be possibly the rest of your life, and in many forms. And I cannot tell you, well, go be confident, because that's going to get you through it. And my initial thought was, tell her you're stronger for it. Normalize the situation. Like narratives that we tell ourselves, and then the realization of, fuck that. Like, I'm sorry, but this is not our problem. We burden it, but it is not our problem. And how do we get through that? So sorry to leave you all on that, but that's something I'm working with. I gotta go jump off to another call, but it is one of the things that is really hard when you are working towards fighting a system, and this system is so in place that you need every side of it to be fighting on that.
Yeah.
It's draining.
It's draining and it's hard, but we do good work, and I know that the impact still moves forward.
I think that was a great story to end on, Mérida, because it just shows the reality of every day. And you're not the 3%, and that is, and even you saying that to them did normalize it, which does something
Powerful,
to it. Right?
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
You're this person who's running this amazing program, even though you're not one of the 3%. You don't need to be the 3% to run something like Project Fearless.
Yes, but how fucked up is it to say that it's okay to be the 3%, because I'm, I appreciate that, Mansi. No, I totally do. It was a real confusing twist in my head of like, what?
It's very confusing, yeah.
Really sorry. Okay, I'm gonna jump off. Really sorry about that. But so nice to meet you all.
Lovely to meet you.
Sorry to drop so many F-bombs at the end.
Thank you.
Love you all. Thanks for this. Talk to you. Nice to meet you, Chelsea. Nice to meet you all. See you all. Bye.
I think we're saying goodbye in any case. We've kept everyone really long. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. And see you at the next one.
Bye.
Bye.